Today we continue our look at some of the key figures in the computer revolution in our series The Digital Age. My guest today was going to be one of those big stars of the business. He had his first company before the age of 20, and then a few years later, quite literally, he saw a light that changed his life. Who takes him seriously these days? Joe Firmage, a very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
An apparition appeared at the bottom of your bed one evening. Tell me about this.
It was a rather unusual experience in my life.
Unique or unusual?
Thoroughly unique. Certainly a first of its kind and the last of its kind, at least so far. It was one morning, I suppose late October or early November of 1997, and we were in the midst of preparing our young company for an initial public offering. And we'd started that process during the...
This was USWeb?
This was USWeb, yes. We'd started the process of preparing for our IPO during one of the best IPO markets that history...
IPO is...
initial public offering, yeah. That in one of the best markets that had been seen for these types of financial transactions. But come late October and into November, the markets started to crash as Asia began to experience what would later become the serious challenge to Asian economies that began to sweep across the world. Anyway, at this time, the IPO was quite a stressful period, and for some reason, I don't recall exactly why. One week, I was browsing the web, visiting some of the subjects that I'd left long before.
Such as?
7 or 8 years before, I was attending the University of Utah on a physics scholarship, studying a domain of science that was and has always been very close to my heart, namely physics. And so I was using the internet actually for the first time in my life to explore some of these old subjects that I'd studied years before in school. And I came across a very unusual press release, an interesting announcement from Lockheed Martin that was describing one of their astrophysicists' new theory on possible explanations for this mysterious force of inertia, the force that your head feels as you would push your foot on the accelerator in your automobile. Scientists have never really answered the question convincingly why things resist acceleration.
So seeing this on the internet started you questioning it again?
No, it flagged my attention. So I followed the link and printed out the scientific paper that was attached to it. And I didn't have time to read it during work, so I took it home with me. And as I was sitting in my bed just before I was going to sleep, I decided to pull it out and read it. It was a fascinating speculation, a new theory on the origin of inertia. And for any student of physics, those questions are some of the deepest questions that there are.
So it was questioning our understanding of mass.
Our understanding of mass and what mass means and what it is.
And what could be done to it.
And conceivably what could be done to it. If we were ever to figure out what inertia is and how gravity works, both of which have a lot to do with our notion of what mass is all about, well then the possibilities could be quite astonishing.
So you read the article? You went to sleep?
I read the article, went to sleep, and 6 hours later my alarm clock goes off, and I slam my hand down on it and hit the snooze button for 9 minutes of sleep. And it was in that 9-minute window that, sort of dozing between sleep and being awake, that an image,
a human
vision, a human image appeared over my bed. I don't know what that image was physically.
Was it a face? Was it a body?
A face. It looked not all that much different, perhaps, than an older version of myself. Maybe. But in any event, we proceeded to have a brief conversation about space travel. And
who initiated the conversation?
He said, "Why have you bothered me?" And I said, I was just sort of responding automatically, because I want to travel in space. And he chuckled. skeptically and said, well, why should you deserve that opportunity? And I said again, without even really thinking, because I'm willing to die for it. And it was at that instant when he sort of closed his eyes, and out of him came this blue sphere of energy that seemed to float down and leave him and come into me. And it was an absolutely extraordinary experience. It was an ecstatic experience.
You felt what?
Intense joy, ecstasy. It was just an amazing feeling. My body was shaking for 2 or 3 minutes after that. I remember because my hand was still shaking after I hit the snooze button again. That interrupted and ended this conversation.
The encounter had lasted how long?
I have no idea, maybe 2 minutes? I don't know.
Did you question it?
Well,
As
certainly.
to whether you'd actually experienced this?
Certainly,
I mean,
I didn't.
You said you'd been under pressure. You'd read an article the night before.
Yes, it was a very unusual time in my life for all of those reasons. And I still don't know what it was. It could have been a relatively mundane, if rare experience in consciousness. It could have been a bad potato, for all I know. But it
could have been a nightmare or a dream.
It could have been, sleep paralysis. It could have been some sort of hypnagogic state.
Do you wonder about this?
Sure. But it wasn't.
Have you consulted anybody about this?
No. It's not like I leaped out of bed and said, well, I've had a vision. I'm going to go, found a science research institute or anything like that. But all it served to do, I would say, in hindsight, is to punctuate a rising appreciation of some of the larger issues that we all confront together as a human family.
It did more than punctuate, because in fact it changed your life quite radically, didn't it?
This is one of the misperceptions that's been circulating in some of the press that's described that event. It wasn't that event, in my opinion, which transformed my worldview.
From a very successful entrepreneur, someone who started up 2 companies very successfully, made a huge amount of money, and there you were, about to change course. If it wasn't that encounter at the foot of your bed that changed your course, what was it?
A glimpse of a way through many of the deepest challenges that human society faces. And that has a lot to do with the science insights that were hinted at in the paper that I read that night. It was, in fact, the scientific questions that I began to study again, that I'd left before in school 8 years before, that awakened my attention to new possibilities.
But you don't attribute it to that encounter?
As I said, that experience seemed to punctuate a rising awareness within me that there perhaps are new solutions to old problems. And as the world accelerates, in large part fueled by the imagination of science, I think some of these new possibilities deserve serious examination, and that is what I've done in the past 2 years.
And to the skeptics who say, well, his systems just got overloaded.
Fine, that's okay. Perhaps that was true.
People within your own company, Gary Rochelle.
I have a wonderful relationship with a lot of people who are equally mystified by that era of my life. But again, I think that the last 3 years can speak for themselves. The activities that I've engaged in the past 36 months, I think, are indicative of the possibilities that I speak of. And they represent a serious and deep commitment on my part to try to help make the world a better place.
Possibilities for a radical change in our understanding of what the world is made up of and what it's capable of.
Yes.
And the possibility of aliens existing.
It's the possibility
You've
that...
talked quite a bit about that.
Sure. It's the possibility that we might best think about our place in the cosmos as the brightest and beautiful species of fish on one particular coral reef called Earth. and that there's an awfully big ocean out there, and that that ocean is likely filled with wonders that we haven't even begun to wonder about yet.
You're talking in very general terms, but you've been
Sure.
more specific.
I have been.
In the past. Are you doubting some of the things that you've said before?
No, I'm simply trying to put them in context. You know, people say, people have often in the past several decades tried to trivialize the whole question of UFOs and alien visitations and such, and I understand that.
How seriously do you take them?
Very seriously. I take it very seriously.
As a belief, as a theory?
As an appraisal of evidence, analyzed scientifically.
Why you? Why doesn't mainstream science go along with you?
Well, actually, there's an increasingly vocal minority in the science community who do take the domain very seriously.
Some dismissed as crackpots.
In fact, a lot of it, dismissed as crackpots. The truth is, of course, that in large part because science has kept a hands-off attitude on these subjects, the domain has been explored most aggressively by amateur scientists and non-scientists. So what do you get? Less than excellent science. And therefore, you get this sort of self-fulfilling cycle that says, well, all the evidence out there is anecdotal and it's not scientifically studied. And besides that, look at all this hogwash and all of this fantasy that pervades the domain. These are all true observations, but that does not mean that at the center of that, the center of all that ambiguous and anomalistic data, there isn't a real gem of knowledge that should be studied.
It doesn't mean it isn't there, but people say you haven't proved that it is. Professor Frank Drake from the Headquarters for Extraterrestrial Intelligence said, we're interested in all new information on this subject. And that's the problem with Joe's stuff. It's not new. I wish him well, but he needs to move on.
Well, I will let history be the judge of whether I should move on from this field of study or not. I don't believe for a moment that the body of UFO evidence has been subjected to good, rigorous scientific study by the largest institutions of science. There have been some superb scientific studies of UFO evidence by some superb scientists. They get relatively little airtime within circles that study and talk about science.
Wasn't it one of the questions that President Clinton wanted answered? There were two questions when he came into office. One was who killed President Kennedy, and the other one was are there any UFOs?
Sure. Well, I heard that too. I think it is printed in some book out there from his administration. But
if I understand correctly, you said you have been in contact with some top U.S. military about UFOs?
A lot of us in the field who study this carefully, and there is a large, quiet community of serious intellectuals who do. Many of us have had the opportunity to speak with individuals with first-hand testimony that
who are
is
these
remarkable.
Individuals?
Well, they're largely people who don't want their names revealed.
What kind of people are
It's very, very senior folks within the military, and in
serving,
some cases...
Serving U.S. military officers.
I'll just leave it at that, okay? Just senior folks within military and scientific circles who do believe that this phenomena bears serious study.
Did they contact you, or did you contact them?
They circulate within a domain of serious students of this domain.
So how many meetings would you have had with them?
I don't want to get into those questions. And I'll tell you why. Not because I don't think they're important questions, but because they're not the most important questions.
But they would add to your credibility, wouldn't they?
Sure, but I'm trying to respect people who I deal with, whose relationships are very important to me.
I'm not asking for their identity. I'm not asking for the nature of the encounters.
But again, let's go back to the big issues. The big issues are, this is not being studied by science, and it should be. Number two, if if some percentage of UFOs do in fact represent extraterrestrial spacecraft, well then a whole vista of future possibilities begins to sweep into view. Not simply about what life's out there, but what can life on Earth evolve to become? Where might you and I be 50 years from now?
Do you think life has, the way it's evolved up till now, has been altered by the fact, I think you've said this, that there have been UFOs and some of the technological advances that we've seen on this planet are due to what's been encountered?
I think that many reports of what I've said here and there have been exaggerated. My appraisal is that life evolved quite naturally on this planet for reasons that are entirely well understood. There are some mysteries in the origin of life, and I don't know whether there's an exobiology discovery ahead. Of course, there are many
exobiology.
This is a new domain of study. Astrobiology is another phrase that describes this domain where space scientists are studying whether life on Earth may have been given some help by material floating in on comets or asteroids. Or basically, they're attempting to help answer the question, how did life arise? I doubt very seriously that life arose on Earth through some sort of extraterrestrial seeding program. But who knows? That's a question that would be really hard for us to answer right now.
February 99, you told Time magazine that you'd been in touch with a federal lab that was about to release world-shattering experimental data in a
That
matter
is not
of weeks.
true.
That's not true?
No. I have had conversations, as I've said, with folks who have reported anomalistic results for various experiments, that is. But these things are very hard to talk about publicly. They're very hard to talk about publicly.
Why are they so hard? Isn't it important, if they're true, that you do talk about them publicly?
Precisely why I'm having this conversation with you. But look at what the press has done to me in the past 3 years. Now, I'm a multimillionaire. I can afford to take some flack from the media. But for an ordinary, hardworking scientist who has to feed a family and who has to maintain credibility amongst peers to be able to continue on with their work, it's not that easy. In fact, it's not easy at all to fight the prevailing winds of science. But I'm
why is that? Why is that a reason for being less than frank about this?
That's a very good question. But it's a fact of life. It's a fact of life that I'm, in my own small way, trying to help shift a little bit in a different direction.
If you believe that there are aliens, if you believe that some of the fundamental laws of physics can be changed, you must be a very excited man, carrying all this around with you on a daily basis.
Well, I'll answer that question, but let me correct it first. I don't believe that the laws of physics can be changed. I just don't believe that we've understood them completely. Let me put it let me put it this way. The prevailing vision of physics contemplates, at least in some theories, 11 dimensions of reality, beyond the 3 ordinary dimensions that we perceive. Other visions of the future of physics talk about the possibility of time travel and opening wormholes to, zip from one part of the cosmos to the other without having to go.
Zero-point gravity.
Well, no, actually, I'll get there in a moment. But my point is, these notions of 11-dimensional reality or opening up wormholes or time travel are being talked about by some of the leading minds in the physics community, right? Those, in my opinion, are certainly no less exotic than the notion that we will invent someday a new type of propulsion system that causes motion to occur without shooting stuff out of a nozzle. If you can figure that out, you got a UFO, okay? So we're not talking about opening up wormholes or time traveling or popping through to another dimension. We're simply talking about causing motion to occur without shooting stuff out of a nozzle. Now, the closest domain of physics that at least I consider most promising to be able to reveal that type of insight is generally called zero-point physics or zero-point energy. This notion that the medium of space is not nothingness, as was thought early in this century, but rather it is an intense ocean of energy, constantly jostling all the particles within it. And if we were just one day to be able to figure out how that process works, well, then maybe there are such wonders as interstellar spacecraft in our future.
So it's all theory. Everything we've talked about is theory.
On the physics
side... You
side...
wrote a manifesto called The Truth,
yeah.
But this is theory, isn't it?
On the physics side, it's all theory. And every one of the scientists who are pursuing this domain are very explicit and careful to underline that fact. It's all theory. However, there is good experimental evidence to suggest that that theory has some solid foundation. One experiment that's been widely hailed as perhaps one of the most important in the 20th century is called the Casimir experiment. And it rather convincingly tells us that indeed, yes, the medium of space around us is an energetic ocean of energy. Perhaps we may engineer it one day.
You talked a little about some of the flack that you've had from the media. There's been a price to pay for you, hasn't there, for having these theories?
Yes, and also...
Losing your position in your own company.
And also, I would take a lot of responsibility for that myself. I don't blame just sensationalistic press accounts for all of my challenges. But
was it a bitter pill to swallow?
It was a bitter pill to swallow.
Being downgraded to a consultant, essentially.
It was voluntary. That was voluntary. I didn't have a fight with my board of directors. I chose to step down to avoid leaving or casting a pall over what was a very bright, ambitious company with thousands of very talented folks on a shared mission. I didn't want to upset that trajectory.
You were always classed as very bright and ambitious yourself, starting your own company at the age of 19. What are you looking for now? Are you still ambitious?
Ambitious for different types of hopes and wants, I think. One of the least covered aspects of The Truth, this draft book that I posted online 2 years ago.
The truth being the theory.
No, indeed. Let's make the point here. One of the least covered but most extensive parts of this book that I put online was some discussion of concerns about our system of economics. And if I was to characterize one of the primary driving reasons that I chose to step down from USWeb, was that a healthy portion of my book was talking about problems with capitalism, problems with the free market economy.
Problems exacerbated by the internet, the web?
Problems exacerbated by the incredible acceleration of scientific understanding around us.
Joe Firmage, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Terrific.